Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to guide my way.
Last week, we learned about the two essential presuppositions that are essential for the rapture to be true and sound doctrine. Quoting again from John Walvoord, we read, "Many arguments have been advanced in support of the pre-tribulation rapture viewpoint, and as many as 50 can be itemized. Two important presuppositions, however, are essential to the pre-tribulation position. Number one, the definition of the church as a separate body of saints distinct from saints in other ages. And number two, the doctrine of a future tribulation of unprecedented severity. We found the second of those essentials is a point that is actually proof texted out of many Bible texts using the word tribulation. So as many as 50 arguments are available, but two presuppositions must be proved before any of these arguments can be valid. As we noted last week, instead of going over 50 arguments, we can just examine the two presuppositions. If they're true, then there may be something to the rapture doctrine, but if they are not true, then the 50 arguments fall with the presuppositions. So let me quote J. Dwight Pentecost in this agreement with John Walvoord. "If these conclusions reached after careful examination of the scriptural revelation are sound and reasonable, it follows that premillennialism is the only satisfactory system of doctrine that harmonizes with the Abrahamic promise. So what should we conclude if these conclusions are not sound and reasonable? Obviously, premillennialism must be considered false doctrine." Keep that in mind. Let's begin with the idea that there must be a definition of the church as a separate body of saints distinct from saints of other ages. That's a very simple statement that can easily be misunderstood. I believe the church is distinct from anything that preceded it. It did not yet exist when Jesus came to earth. Jesus said, "I will build my church" in Matthew 16:18. So Mr. Pentecost isn't saying it is just separate in that sense. There is more to this than just the church coming along after Judaism was around for hundreds of years. The point here is that rapture doctrine must keep a separate plan in place for the church, which must be viewed as distinct from the nation of Israel. This teaches, therefore, that God has a dual program in place. One program deals with Israel. A second program deals with Gentiles by way of the church. Remember, the rapture is supposed to be about the church. According to rapture doctrine, Israel doesn't get caught up, just the church. Israel remains on earth because it is supposed to be in place for the millennial reign of Jesus on the throne of David. The rapture becomes the different path for the church in the dispensational dual program. That's a little complicated, and for most people, it's easier just to look at 1 Thessalonians 4 as a rapture passage and move on. We've already seen that 1 Thessalonians 4 isn't the proof that most people see it as, and these assumptions or presuppositions are important to this doctrine. If you missed that, I'll put a link right up here to the first of those two videos on that. Others prefer an emphasis on Matthew 24:40 through 41 and leave the entire question of a rapture to that. As we proved in this video right up here, Matthew 24:40 through 41 does not teach what these people think it teaches. In fact, it teaches the opposite. If you've been using the two men in the field and the two women working in the mill to prove a rapture, you might want to go back and watch that video. To study this presupposition, we must go back to the promises God made to Abraham in Genesis 12. Everyone should understand that these are a vital key to understanding Scripture. In fact, they are the plot of the Bible, as we saw early on in our rules of interpretation. I and the authors I disagree with will all agree on this. The promises to Abraham settle this question. Unfortunately, we don't have time in this video to set up the first point, But next week, we'll start tying in the promises to Abraham. Most people don't even realize that scholars who teach rapture doctrine stake its very existence on what God meant in those promises. Do those promises uphold it or not? Please join me next week for a closer look at this.